Welcome to WiscoDice!
I, you will notice, am not Conzi. But today I am Matt, the Ghost Walker, and today I'm joined by...
I'm Justin, the Meeples champion.
All right, and this is episode 156 of the WiscoDice Tabletop Gaming Podcast. Today is July 30th, 2026. And let's get excited, because today we're going to talk a little bit of that rise of the digital DM and some of the digital tools that we use for D&D. We know there's hundreds, maybe even thousands of tools, but we're going to talk about the ones that we either have experience or we know are very popular in this space. But first, let's roll into what games we've been playing. So the first game that we're going to talk about is Cities USA. It's published by Devere Games. Playtime's about 45 to 60 minutes. Can play 1 to 4 players. This is a game that my wife picked up, got exposed to it during one of the monthly gaming sessions that we do. It's very similar to the original Cities game. The USA adds a few new elements to it. Things like there are bridges now because you're no longer allowed to have sort of dead-end streets. Skyscrapers, things like that. So there's some slight enhancements with how it plays, but for anybody who's familiar with the Cities games, it's just a solid addition to Cities. And if you've never played Cities, you basically have a set of meeples. You use them to claim city tiles or enhancements, like think of things you'd add to like a park or a water feature. You also collect types of building, different colored buildings, and you collect a scoring card every round. So you kind of competing with other people for different tiles and things like that. But the end of the game is really just this giant point salad. So even though you may not really know where you're at some point, you're going to hit that end of the game and you're going to be surprised at how many times you lap around it. I think the last time my wife and I played this, I cleared 200 points, which was, like I said, just mind-boggling to me, because before you start scoring, you don't score in the middle, you just score at the very end.
So with this one, are you building in a single city, or are you building individual cities as players? I haven't played this one.
Yeah, no, you're building individual. So you collect a tile, you're building a grid. I think if you're playing with like the 3 or the 4 player game, you're building a 3x3 city. If you're playing when you play this 2, you change it to, I think you're doing like a 3x5, but you basically get like city tiles, and then what you do is you add them to your city, and you're building this city from those tiles. So you build your own city from those tiles, and so you're also competing for a limited number of skyscraper tops and things like that.
Yeah, this looks cool. I like a good little build your own thing kind of game. Like I like the satisfaction of building up your own city, and kind of like the way that it looks like you're stacking up buildings to make these skyscrapers and stuff. It looks really cool.
Well, and the funny thing is sometimes you might find yourself avoiding the skyscrapers because there's also like 3 big, I call them 3 big point scoring things that are on, like each map has its own 3 conditions. So like Los Angeles is one, Detroit has a different set and stuff like that. Okay. So there's 3 key points that like you get, like the first person to get it puts their little ring thing on it, and then 3 people can score points there too. But those will drive you a certain direction. But the scoring cards you get too, because some of the scoring cards might be like get points for each only 1 high building, or get points for having 4 high buildings, or for certain color buildings. So you might find yourself grabbing tiles that are specific to that color, and you're never quite sure where you're going to land, because every round you're picking up another scoring opportunity. So it's kind of nice from that perspective, because it forces you to kind of keep adjusting your plans every round.
And then would you suggest Cities USA over base original cities, or do you have a preference? Or?
I like them both. I think my wife prefers Cities USA, but I like both. I mean, both are just fine. I mean, Cities USA, the only real differences I think are the skyscrapers and the bridges. There might be a few differences with how they're scored, but overall, I mean, I felt like they're both really solid games, and like if you've never played Cities, you could easily pick up Cities USA and play it just fine.
Nice, looks cool.
Great. Well, that is Cities USA, published by Devere Games.
Our next game we're going to talk about is Dice Forge. Dice Forge is a 2 to 4 player dice building game from Libelud, and the main gimmick of this game is that you have two big plastic dice with customizable dice faces on them. And as you play, you get to add new dice faces to your dice and change what they do and make them more powerful. On your turn, you basically get to do two major things. You can either upgrade your dice by paying gold, which is one of the key resources in the game, or you can go on complete these heroic tasks, which is basically kind of like defeating these monster cards, which you then collect, which provide you ongoing abilities or one-time kind of benefits, an action you can trigger on your turn. So you have gold as a resource. You have two other major resources, which are called sun shards and moon shards. And each of those are used to collect these special monster cards, which range in value from like just a single shard, moon shard, sun shard, all the way up to like six shards, or there's a special card that costs 5 of each of them, which is just worth a ton of points. Cards you collect are worth points or provide you those abilities, as I said. But as you play on your turn, everybody rolls their two big plastic dice, and you get the resources that show on those dice. So you have one dice that has a bunch of gold and a sun shard on it. You have another dice that starts off with a moon shard and a bunch of gold and like 2 points, a side that gives you just 2 points if you roll it. So every turn on whoever's turn it is, you're always rolling your dice and getting something. But on your turn, you get that choice of either upgrading your die or collecting these cards. The dice faces you can buy improve your dice in a bunch of different ways. You could pick up a new face that lets you gain 6 gold instead of 1 gold, or you could pick up one that grants you 2 moon shards instead of 1 moon shard. And so that's kind of got the deck building feel to it, of like slowly improving your dice over the course of the game to build up a kind of an engine to produce a particular resource or more gold, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Or maybe you're just buying faces that earn you a ton of points every time you roll them, and you're just gonna earn points throughout the game by rolling points on your dice. I played this one with my family recently, and I think it's a nice lightweight game with enough strategic decisions to feel like it's still a game. My son is 10 years old. He picked it up no problem. He was making decisions and like choosing which dice faces to pick and which cards to go for, and he got really into it. So it's very easy to learn, and I think it's a nice family lightweight kind of game that still has some interesting decisions in it. Yeah, it's one I like, and it's a gimmick I haven't mechanic I haven't seen a lot of. This customizing dice. They have kind of a cool system of these little plastic tiles that you can just slot into these big plastic dice that you use. It works really well, and it's a very fun and satisfying game to play. I think you've probably played this one, Matt. It's been around for a while.
I have. I know my wife picked this one up after we played it over at Conzi's house one time, and she really, really enjoyed it, and I do too. It's like you said, it's a nice kind of light afternoon game that you can just kind of pull out.
Yep.
And I mean, I guess for those people that are maybe a little bit more tactile, it does have that real tactile because you're constantly changing your dice and playing with them, as long as you don't lose the little pieces at some point.
Oh yeah.
That's the only real concern. So, if you've got like pets that like to eat things, this might be a challenge, but overall it's a great kind of quick game to play, but it's fun, unless you like really are terrible at rolling dice like myself, but you get to stack those dice, so you can make it so it's more likely that you'll succeed.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, so that was Dice Forge from Libelud, and I'm going to ask that you please go check out WiscoDice.com for the links to all the games we discussed. And while you're there, or while you're at it, I should say, please leave a review of this podcast wherever you download podcasts. It really helps us out. Do it now.
Do it now. Channel my Conzi for you there.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and roll into our main topic. Here at WiscoDice, we love all board games and tabletop role-playing games. We know all the challenges, scheduling, keeping things organized, and the overall... We are always looking for ways to enhance the experience of our players. Today, we're going to kind of hone in on what are some of the digital enhancements you can do for your tabletop role-playing experience. We're going to talk through some of the things you could maybe add to enhance your players, or just things that maybe make your life easier, because we know that it's a challenge, and sometimes getting together everybody in person isn't always an option too. But whether it is or it isn't, we're going to talk about different tools that might help you with this. Now, we recognize there are literally hundreds, thousands of tools that could use. We probably aren't going to highlight maybe your favorite. Please leave us a comment on this podcast, wherever you're seeing it. We'd love to hear more about some of the tools that you use, because we might add them to our personal repertoires. First of all, of the digital tools, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the mapping tools and things you might use there. For myself, there's a tool I picked up called Arkenforge. Now, Arkenforge I picked up last Christmas, right around the Christmas holidays. It is a buy once, own it forever kind of. At the time of this recording, it costs $34.99 for the base kind of system. And then there are plenty of packs you can buy that add to it as well. I will say I picked it up. I think when I bought it, it was 60% off. I think I only paid like $19.99. It was on sale like sometime like after Thanksgiving and before Christmas, things like that. It supports all sorts of things. You're going to get more, I would say, realistic, or sometimes some of the graphics can look more like video game style graphics, but it also supports like just basic. If you want to do map drawing with basic dungeon walls, things like that, you could do that too. Now, it does support building some more dynamic things. You can layer stuff to make it look like there's water flowing down rivers and things like that too. But it also, its particular thing also comes with a VTT, which for those of you who don't know what VTT is, that stands for Virtual Tabletop. It does come with a VTT feature, but this particular product is designed for in-person gaming. So think about the DM who, if you've ever seen them on, like I've watched videos where they have like a full TV embedded in their table or something like that. Or you can buy projectors. I bought a fairly inexpensive projector, but you could buy more expensive projectors too and project it down on the table as well. It uses packs and add-ons. It does have community add-ons too that you can add as well. The other thing that you can do with it is things like, for example, I was running a campaign for Ribe of the Frost Maiden, and I was able to get digital copies of the original maps, and I was able to import them. And there's a feature that you can use, especially for maps that already have grids drawn on them, where you can line up the grids and you just click on the grid points that are all connected, and it resized the whole map to match the gridding and things like that. So, there's definitely some really cool things you can do there. Like, I will say one of the things I love to combine this particular thing with is there is and this was recommended by the people at Arkenforge, because they have some wonderful tutorials. On the internet, there's a place called thefaithfulforce.com, and they have an online token generator and creator. The players wanted to have their own custom tokens. It was super easy. It took me, 5 minutes or less with each character. Some people sent me an AI generated image they did on the internet. Some of them drew something. Some of them went into Baldur's Gate 3 and captured screenshots of their character recreated in Baldur's Gate 3. So lots of options there, but all of them took me less than 5 minutes to generate a cool token for them. You can do the same thing with these tokens with, like, if you go get a picture of a skeleton or your favorite monster and stuff like that. There's plenty of great images on the internet. Of course, I always say make sure you're not using copyrighted material. Super easy to combine something like that with there. And I have done a good bit of building my own maps and things like that. It's pretty nice from that perspective.
Yeah, it seems like it's got a lot of cool features. I like these, like, that you can kind of build in these animations to your maps and stuff to kind of bring things to life. That seems like a cool aspect to it.
I mean, it's got that, and like for like from a VTT perspective, it has all the typical stuff you would expect, like Fog of War, dynamic lighting. It supports setting up like character tokens with things like dark vision. And if you have a dark vision character nowhere near a source of light, the stuff that they can see in their visual cone is basically in black and white on the screen.
Yeah.
So it actually looks like dark vision and things like that. So they've got some really kind of neat things like that. And like you can insert like dynamic lighting. So if you have like if you have a campfire, you could put a campfire and how much light it would normally produce, and torches on the wall, and it'll give flickering effects and stuff like that. It's pretty nice from that perspective. And like I said, I'm sure like once or twice a year it's on sale, and you can get a pretty nice deal on that. They have like extra packs and stuff like that. So if you're looking for elves or specific character classes and tokens, you can get all that. But like I said, they have some nice community packs too that you can just go get. So
nice.
So what about you? What about you when it comes to maps and things like that, Justin?
Yeah, I got two major tools that I use for my maps. My campaign that I'm running is totally online, so a little bit different than what Matt's doing. And it's also 100% homebrew, for better or worse. A little more work on my part. The first mapping tool I use is called Dungeon Draft. Dungeon Draft is designed for battle maps and dungeon maps. It is, again, a one-time purchase, locally installed application. It's going for $19.99 these days. And it's what I use to build all of my maps for running combats and going through dungeons and stuff. It has a kind of a unique, cartoony, almost watercolory kind of style to it. It's definitely a unique look. It's got its own look to it. So that's kind of the default assets all come with this cartoony kind of style to them. But you can also purchase or find free assets available all over the place online. Right. One of the sites I have used before is called cartographyassets.com, and you can get objects and textures and tiling textures for doing like the floors of a castle or something like that,
right.
As well as all the decorative objects and stuff that you want. And some of those are in more realistic styles, and some of them are more in the style of kind of the base Dungeon Draft with this cartoony look to it. Mm-hmm. But lots of options for you to download.
Yeah,
I've probably built like 40 to 50 different battle maps with it. I find it very easy to use. Its UI is intuitive. It's easy to do things like make kind of organic looking caves. They have this cave building system. Yeah. So if you're doing caves or you're doing like structures with like walls and floors, you just sort of draw a square and it kind of tiles out a room with walls and a floor.
Nice.
Whatever texture you pick for the floor. So that's really slick and easy to use. And of course, it also supports exports to most major VTTs out there, which includes like lighting support. So when you put light sources in there, those will translate into VTT for things like, token vision and fog of war and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the walls that you put in there will block, line of sight and interact with the light sources and everything. So what you'd expect from like a VTT, it supports that stuff too. I really like it. Like I've used it a bunch. They seem to be keeping up and updating it fairly often. So it seems to have a long life to it at this point. I like some of the default art style, like you said. There's one thing I will say is there are advantages and disadvantages to like more realistic art styles, because from one perspective, the advantage of and people go, oh, but I want it, to be fancier. The reality is a simpler art style sometimes is so much easier to actually see on the screen and for characters to understand what's going on. You know what I mean? I mean, ultra realistic has its disadvantages because sometimes people are like, oh, it's gritty and it's hard to sometimes see what's going on. I mean, it can look cool, but the reality is you're playing a tabletop role-playing game, you're not playing Baldur's Gate 3. So yeah.
Unless you've translated Baldur's Gate 3 into a campaign. But yeah, I kind of like the default art style. It's kind of interesting. And
I like it too. Yeah.
I will point out Arc Forge does have the same feature. It can export to like the same, like you can export it to a Foundry or like
Yep.
Roll20 and all the standard VTTs and stuff like that. So you can build the map, you could build stuff in Arc Forge and export it to an online thing with the same thing you were talking about, like that support for dynamic lighting and token
Yeah.
line of sight and stuff like that too. So it's nice to see that kind of very consistent like set of abilities across the
Yep.
platforms. So, but
Yep.
you use something else too, don't you?
Dungeon Draft is my battle map thing.
Mm-hmm.
I used to make all my battle maps and dungeon maps. But the other tool I use is called Incarnate. Incarnate I use mostly for world and regional maps.
Mm-hmm.
It actually has a lot of different map styles that you can use, which include battle maps. So they have like fantasy style battle maps, regional maps, and world maps. There's watercolor battle maps and cities. There's even sci-fi battle maps, and then they have like a world map in a parchment style, which just like ink on a parchment paper
Mm-hmm.
look, as well as like a classic black and white battle map for like old school dungeons, or just a simple printable black and white format. But I really like it for doing my world maps and regional maps. When I'm world building, I want to have a map to look at to kind of think about the landscape and where cities are and where villages are, and what cultures are doing what in what places. So I wanted a good full featured kind of world map tool. I started out my whole campaign world with like a hand drawn map, and I was able to easily import that into Incarnate
Mm-hmm.
and make it like this living, colorful, realistic looking world map. It's got thousands of little trees and city images, like little cities that you can put, and towns and villages,
Mm-hmm.
mountains, of course, rivers, all that stuff. So the tool has a ton of nice looking assets for building world map. There's plenty more available in their marketplace. They have a marketplace that's available for additional map assets, but I think their default side is still pretty big, and you can go a
Nice.
long way with their default stuff.
Yeah.
One difference with this one, it is a subscription. It's $25 a year, and it is an online only application. So you're doing all your stuff through the browser, but I've never had a problem with it. It can handle like really large maps pretty easily with like I said, hundreds of thousands of little objects on them. It can export images like think up to maybe 5,000 by 5,000 pixels, so you can get some really high resolution
Wow.
exports out of it for wherever you want to use those. Again, really intuitive and easy to use, I find as well. I think it's pretty easy to just dive in and start carving up the landscape and making a
Mm-hmm.
continent, throwing some rivers into it, putting some cities down, trees down. Yeah, it's worked really well for my purposes,
Yeah.
and I'm always finding myself going back in there and just making little tweaks to my world map, finding like a new feature to add, like, ooh, this is a cool looking cliff ridge. Let me put in some cliffs over here to like spice up some
Mm-hmm.
area of my map. So it's always fun to kind of tweak it and add stuff to it.
Well, and I think I would expect your players are similar to mine, where I know players love having a good either world or regional map because they're always wanting to plan, what if we go here, what if we go there,
Hmm.
and having that adds so much depth because it's probably a little different when you're doing it online, but even then, if they have access to that map, right, they're going to be doing planning. And what if we look over here? Because I love that people standing around the table going, oh, we could go over here. Let's stare at it
Yeah.
on the wall. And that's such a cool idea. So,
No, yeah, I think it's definitely good to have a good world map, and Incarnate's a good way to do it, I
yeah.
think.
From a feature perspective, some of you, like I said, I use a VTT that works in person, but Justin, you said you do yours online.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how do you project to your players? What type of VTT are you using so that your players can get immersed in this story that you're telling them?
Yeah. When I started my campaign, we actually did use Roll20 because it was really easy to get going and just get everybody into one system. You just make an account, you jump in online, and you've got some tools out there to throw some maps in and move some tokens around and do some basic stuff. it's probably improved since I last used it, but I always felt like I was just using a browser every time I was using Roll20 to run my campaign. What I ended up with is called Foundry VTT, and that is a standalone application with a one-time purchase. It's $50 right now, with the benefit of only really the DM or the person who's running the campaign needs to have a copy. Everybody else can kind of join the server that you host where it's running. But it really creates a much more immersive atmosphere than something like a Roll20. It feels like I'm in a game world. It's the style of the interface is much more immersive, and it has tons and tons of features and customizability. Out of the box, it comes with the D&D SRD, so system reference or system resource documents, whichever. So you can just boot it up and run a real basic D&D campaign with basic classes and monsters, and it has a database of items and spells and classes and all the stuff you'd expect from everything that's in the SRD that's freely available without license to use. But of course, it also has a marketplace where you can go and purchase licensed content for D&D and other game systems, Pathfinder. I'm sure there's a bunch other that's supported. I think they even have their own campaign setting that they support now. Something I think it's called Ember, that you can get maps and campaigns and adventures for. One thing I'll say, if you start out with the SRD and you want to include stuff that's not in the SRD, there's a little bit of work involved. And so if you want to bring in a spell for one of your players that is not in the SRD, you're going to have to go in, manually create that spell yourself, put in all the details, do any of the work to have it refer to the right character stats and the right effects and stuff. You can kind of program in just about anything that you want, but there is a little bit of effort you're going to have to put in if you don't go and grab the licensed stuff for like normal D&D Player's Handbook or Dungeon Master's Guide, stuff like that. And it's totally doable. Like I said, my campaign is like totally homebrew, so I make my own monsters, stat blocks, and items and stuff like that sometimes, or pull items from other source books that I have and bring them into this system. Totally doable. You just got to be willing to put in that effort to get it into your players' hands.
Absolutely.
Oh, and the other huge thing about it is that it has a huge array of add-on modules to enhance the game in so many different ways. You can get stuff that will give your players a nice little heads-up display, as if almost they're like in a Baldur's Gate 3 kind of game, where they can click on an attack button to just do their attack, or click a spell button to cast a spell, or use a certain skill or whatever. There's animations for spells. There's sound effects you can add in. Like, one of the things that I did special for my players is, for some of their more commonly used spells, I made sure to add in animations and sound effects. So like, one of my players is a warlock, and they're using Eldritch Blast all the time, as you might expect. The Eldritch Blast spell, when they trigger it, it shoots out this bolt of light and this sound effect. And then I had another player who's a barbarian, so anytime he'd use his rage, there'd be like this like scream
Nice.
when he goes into his rage. So you can do all kinds of neat little stuff like that. It really helps it feel like a real in-person D&D game is really
Nice.
the thing that I get the most out of it. So I would highly recommend Foundry if for anyone who's looking around for a VTT to use. If you want to graduate from Roll20, and try some other things, I definitely would recommend it.
Well, I may consider it, because I think my next campaign, I'm writing one that's going to be based in Eberron, but Eberron doesn't really have like a big campaign book. I mean, it has a book, but nothing like that's like a canned campaign that you just go run. So I'm probably writing my own,
Sure.
but I really like the world. But I think part of it's going to be online, so it's definitely interesting, something I'm going to look into.
Yeah, no, it's cool. If you're ever interested, I could set up an account for you. You could just log in, and we could mess around within the system on my system, so you can kind of play around from a player's perspective and see how things work at some point, and I'll show you some stuff. But yeah.
Right. So beyond that, there's so many more things you can do in person. There's so many things we've looked at. Some of these things, I mean, our DM Conzi does for us things like audio, music, ambient sounds, things like
Hmm.
that. I know, Justin, you said Foundry can obviously support some of that. I know Arkenforge supports some of that. There's some out of the box. There's plenty of other resources you can find online too. The only thing I will always warn everybody, make sure you're not grabbing copyrighted things and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But I know that there are some great resources that you can find stuff. There are some you can buy. I was just looking at a Kickstarter that's coming soon that's like a whole sound system. I always think there's definitely some advantages for audio. I think that like there's some advantages where, especially if it's like background music, like I once or twice had like a tavern music or something when they're in the bar or something, and I feel like it helps draw players into like the environment they're in. The only thing to be cautious about, at least from my perspective, is make sure it stays ambient or an enhancement and isn't just like some sound effects that just become obnoxious or things like
Yeah,
that. What
yeah.
are your thoughts on audio and stuff like that, Justin?
I always appreciate when Ben has some ambient audio going during
Hmm.
our game. I think it enhances it greatly. I really like to have that, but you're right that you do have to find that balance between kind of a nice ambient background and stuff being obnoxious. So
Yeah.
I've experimented with having ambient sounds and like music and environmental sounds like rain or thunderstorms and stuff like that in my game before. And online, I kind of find like it almost adds too much noise to what's going on when everybody's just
Hmm.
talking over headsets. And so I've stepped away from that a little bit online. I think it just works better in person,
Right.
to have something in the background. And I
Hmm.
think it's a great kind of enhancement you can use. One time, so I ran a one shot in person a little while ago, and used a site called Tabletop Audio to just do some basic background stuff, like you said, like it's some tavern music or some traveling music or combat music that you can trigger. And I felt it worked pretty well. I think it just the caution I would give is it's just giving you more to do as a DM. So be ready
Right.
for that extra thing to manage that you have to deal
Yeah.
with. Like some of those soundboards and stuff that they have out there are really cool, and tossing in a fun sound effect like a wolf howling in the background or a spell effect going off. I think that's really cool, but you're adding to your workload as a DM, so
Yeah.
be cautious about that.
Yeah. I found when I was prepping for sessions, it added a solid hour to my prep time
Mm,
because I had, well, for the particular VTT I have, because I don't use a separate soundboard, I had
yeah,
to prep all the audio inside the VTT with Arkenforge, and that got to be a little overwhelming because I would have to kind of group all the things into what I wanted so that I could reach them easily and fire them off. A separate soundboard, if you're in person, might work better, or at least a tablet or something that you can fire it off. But yeah, I agree with Justin. You're adding to your workload because it's just one more thing you need to prep, and you
yeah,
just want to make sure it's an enhancement, and it's it's adding to the atmosphere and not becoming, oh look, it's the 47th time I've heard the sword clang, or you know what I mean.
yeah,
It's so
yep, exactly. Some of the other stuff. What else? What other kind of game enhancements, digital enhancements? One thing that I have dipped my toe into a little bit is like you'll often see Kickstarters for these packs of tokens for VTT. So digital tokens of monsters or heroes or NPCs, what have you, and just like here, get 1,000 tokens for your RPG to use,
right.
which I think is really appealing. I think it's like, yeah, I don't have to do all this work myself to go create tokens.
Hmm.
I think if you're doing like a custom token for a character, yeah, that makes sense. You go find the cool image you want, like you were mentioning, on that one website and create your own custom token. But as a DM, you want stuff I want stuff that's readily made and available for me to
Right.
just pull in without as much prep time and effort.
Hmm.
So, I've done a couple of those, found some cool options, but the downside I think is you do have to be careful that you are actually going to be able to get use out of all these tokens. what I found with some of the ones I've tried is that some of them are just kind of AI generated. I mean, AI slop, for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
and hard to find a use for.
Yeah.
Like I I do create my own creatures and monsters to use in my game, but like with these token packs, I got to figure out how I'm supposed to use this thing and then like come up with a stat block
Right.
for it. So that can be kind of a hassle. And some of them just aren't good enough for my mind to they're just obviously AI generated and not clean enough, not
Yeah.
clear enough to use as a token. So there's some downsides to some of that stuff
Yeah.
too. But
Well, and what I found is I purchased something and it just happened to be through like Humble Bundle, but it was for a company
Mhm.
that they produce their own content. They have like adventures, and then they build all the stuff that goes with it, the digital assets
Mhm.
and that makes sense. But what I found was frequently is that they would include a bunch of tokens, and there'd be like 4 to 7 different tokens for the exact same monster, which is fine. But like you said, the thing that I found and I'd be interested to see your perspective from this. When I was projecting it on the tabletop, some of the tokens would not show up as well. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I don't know if this is less of an issue if you're on a monitor, you know what I mean, staring at a computer screen, that it's like it's easier to tell what the heck it is. But I found like it was harder to do on a like projected on a tabletop because they were just like, I don't know what that is. It just looks like a blob to me because it's only an inch big, right? So like
Yeah.
it's not like you're looking at a big thing unless you blow it up.
Yeah.
But you know, that was one of the things I struggled with. Is some of the tokens, they're almost too fine detailed, because
Mhm.
then when you project them on something, it's like people are like, ah, it's fine, but I don't know what it is because it's too small then, you know, versus like
Yeah.
a super easy to tell, oh, that's a skeleton. I know what that is, you know.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, I think it's less of a problem when you're looking at a monitor because then you're dealing with
higher
the monitor's
res,
resolution, and yeah, I think you have
higher
probably
brightness.
higher resolution and brightness to deal
Yeah,
with. I really like the top down tokens, so I like this
hmm,
that actually are like an isometric like top down look of like a person, so you kind of
sure.
see like the top of their head and their shoulders and their arms kind of sticking out,
Hmm.
which can be its own problem because if you have one of those nice little circle tokens that just has a skeleton face, you're like, oh, that's a skeleton, easy. So I do find that some of those top down tokens, which I do prefer, are harder to
Right.
parse sometimes
Yeah.
than just a more simple traditional circular token.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of my preference, and
Yeah. Well,
I try to get a little more realism with like to make it look more like a
hmm.
miniature. I like that feel.
Yeah. Well, I think in that same vein, I had a similar experience with purchasing pre-made battle maps and stuff like that online. Some of them, like from the same company, but I ended up with like, in some cases you'll get, maybe they're AI generated, maybe somebody made them. I don't know, but like they were nice quality maps, but my problem would be like 6 copies of the same map. One's sort of like, it's a crypt, but this one's colored purple and this one's green and
Uh,
this is, so I mean, like I didn't have a problem with the quality, and you could easily lay a grid on it, and it seemed decent from that perspective. My problem was more, the work came into, like Justin said, figuring out how the heck you would use this map,
mhm.
because I will be the first one to tell you, I keep a book. It's kind of a neat. I just purchased it on Amazon, but you can get them through your friendly local game store, where it's like random maps that have like city maps or this or that. Because sometimes
Yeah.
you're just doing a random encounter and something, and I'm like, I don't need this specific part of the city map. I just pull out a section of city map. Boom, there you go. That's where the fight takes place. Similar thing could be said for a lot of these maps that are generated by them, but I think the thing that you have to remember is, just like we talked about with the audio and the tokens, you're going to have work to figure out how to use them. And
Yep.
I'm going to say probably reorganize them too. Like you may need to
Mhm.
rename them, relabel them, however you import them into your VTT, so that you can at a glance go, I need a forest map with a river. And like you may have to take the time yourself to relabel them and reorganize them manually to make
Yeah.
them useful. Because my concern is you get 100. I've seen advertisements for 200,000 battle maps, and I'm just like, okay, I question how many of those are really different, but like how
Yeah.
useful are some of them, right? So,
Yeah.
not everything's created equal, but you could absolutely get them. Just understand you're going to have a lot, in my opinion, of work to relabel them, make sure it's useful. Otherwise, if you got 10,000 battle maps, how do you find the one you want buried in that,
Mm.
right? Unless you have really good names on them to know what you're, so you can search them, right? You got to make them searchable in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, the thing I find too with pre-made battle maps is because everything I do is homebrew, I have a hard time fitting a pre-made map into my game world sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then like they'll have these really cool maps with like the skull temple. I'm like, well, do I have a place for a skull temple with what my party is doing right now? Or like they'll have like a forest, but it's like this forest isn't kind of the right kind of forest that I need.
Mm-hmm.
So I end up just making my own stuff a lot of the times. I really like pre-made battle maps. I think often they make them they're beautiful and people put a lot of effort into them. But I do have a hard time sometimes finding like it'll be like this floating cliff in the air, and I'm like, I don't know if I have a what am I going to do with this? Like
Right.
is it something that I need for my campaign? So
Yeah, absolutely. What about some other tools, Justin? I know you had talked about some other tools that you have that you like to incorporate into what you do.
yeah, I got a couple kind of random tools that I just wanted to call out because I think they're really neat, are just either fun to use or just can make your game prep more fun. And the first one is the Wataboo WATABOU Village Generator. This is a very simple tool that will basically just generate a little rural medieval fantasy. I mean, this is kind of a medieval village with trees and farmland and water if you want. And it'll kind of generate little houses and structures and roads, making everything together. Just if you're got your PCs going through the wilderness and they happen upon a little village and you're like, well, I don't know what this village looks like, you can just pull this website out and generate one in seconds.
Mm-hmm.
It has a bunch of parameters you can tweak. So you can say like, oh, I want there to be a river. I want this, or I want this location to be an island, or I want it to be next to a highway, or there be a lot of farmland. And you can just generate a new town super easily with like a click of a button. It has a kind of a cool hand-drawn art style, and I've used it to create just some maps for little basic village maps for random villages that my players have been to. Yeah, really easy to use and just a cool little tool.
Nice.
The other one I wanted to call out is a subreddit called RD100. The whole premise of this subreddit is that they make lists of 100, ideally 100 things that are just random categories of stuff that you might want to use for world building or running a campaign or a game. They have a sticky list of all the completed lists that they have, but there's ongoing ones all the time. And people make new lists, and the community adds to them. Just some random ones I'm pulling up. You can have a list of 100 fantasy wine names. You're at a tavern and you need a special wine for the tavern to have. You can go to this list and just randomly get a unique wine name or a unique tavern name. They have like dungeon graffiti. They have thieves guild quests. There's 100 names for legendary swords. There's a ton of these things, and the new ones happen all the time. I love this for just creativity and world building and gathering ideas and stuff. I used it to come up with some fantasy dog breeds for my players who were interested in like purchasing some dogs from like a dog breeder in this village they went to go visit. And so I was just kind of nice to have a resource that's like, here's just a bunch of random unique names for different kinds of dogs, like a goblin warhound or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's really neat, and I love community projects like this and see all this kind of creativity come through.
Well, I think it's nice just from the perspective of we as DMs don't always have to recreate the wheel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, DMs, I feel like, are creative people to begin with, but it's very difficult to think what are all the unique wines and what are all the unique and there are times when you're not in the most consequential place. Like you might have something for some main city that you've built up, but they just happen to have run across a village buried in the countryside. I don't need to recreate the wheel and have this whole elaborate design for this village. I can use the village generator and then have a couple of unique things from this list. Then it makes it at least memorable without it being the DM had to spend 47 hours coming up with this village.
Yep, exactly.
that the,
Exactly.
that the party immediately destroys with 3 fireballs in it.
Yeah.
One of the last topics we wanted to talk about is organizational tools. We're all, as DM, I mean, we all organize differently. Some people live in notebooks, some people live wherever. Two of the key, we felt like, organizational tools that are maybe a little bit more digital we want to talk about is OneNote and Obsidian. Justin, I know you're a big fan of OneNote. I personally grew up in the business world using OneNote extensively, so I'm very familiar with OneNote. I've been doing a little bit of research on Obsidian as well, so I know both of them have some plugins you can get for specifically D&D. I've never used plugins for D&D in OneNote myself, personally, but like I said, both of them, I know there's ways to customize them, add external content. You can link to multiple pages or subparts of a page. You can easily click back and forth, and honestly, if you know the commands in OneNote, I know you can like flip back and forth between pages super quick. One thing with OneNote is you absolutely don't quote us on this, but we believe it is a possibility through Microsoft you can download it for free, just OneNote itself. You don't have to own the whole suite. But it may require you to be online because Microsoft does tend to check their licenses periodically. But usually you can use it offline without too much problem. Justin, you said you use it extensively. What do you find you really like about OneNote for your personal organization?
Yeah, I use OneNote. I also, similar to you, have used it with work a fair bit because we use Microsoft stuff at work. I used when I first started kind of gathering all my world building notes, which originally were paper, just handwritten stuff. I started bringing them into this old program, which I don't know if it still exists anymore. It's called Evernote.
Oh, I remember Evernote. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like they're still around, which was kind of like a precursor to like what OneNote ended up being. And so when I got access to OneNote for the first time, I basically just imported all my Evernote stuff into OneNote and went from there. So I've just used OneNote for a really long time. I have hundreds of pages of notes for world building, for my campaigns, for notes like session notes and stuff like that. And it's simple, it's flexible. You can easily put in text and format text and bring in images and bring in links and create links to other notes. And honestly, like the big thing for me was just to have something that I could search within for different stuff and world building ideas that I came up with, so I could have some consistency, across my game world, and like easily search through these many pages worth of notes. I think it's just really easy to use and pretty easy to organize. I do want to kind of check out what kind of plugins there are available because like you, I've never really looked into plugins for it, but if there's something available, I should really check that out.
Yeah, I did some quick Googling because I was looking to compare a little bit of OneNote and Obsidian. And Obsidian is kind of like what I like to call the new hotness. And for those of you who are like, but I've been using it for 5 years. Yeah, we get it. But there's a lot of online DMs that are starting to talk about it. And there's plenty of YouTube stuff you can get specifically on Obsidian. I will say, if you know anything about the system, it's just basically a big set of files with markup language in the backside. So it is fairly easy to back up if you're looking to do things like that. It is one of those download once, it's free, you can use it no problem. You do have to learn the markup language a little bit. It is fairly straightforward, but I will say it threw me off the first time. The base interface reminds me of a developer interface, frankly, but there's a lot of skins and stuff like that. So you can like reskin it to look like medieval fantasy. It reminds me of the old skins you'd be able to use to do's in like Opera browser and stuff like that. So there are a ton of great community add-ons for this. There's like a combat creator, initiative tracker. There's like the SRD. You can import the SRD, and you can have all those standard stat blocks and things like that in there. You can add new SRD stuff. So if you like to create your monsters and stuff like that, you can add them all into this kind of database of stuff. One of the things, Conzi showed me a little bit of his setup. You could have a broom, and inside you can have all your notes on what you're going to do during the session. You could build, and let's say you had a room. Inside is a description of several key things. You could have a history check and an arcana check or something. And then if they're successful, you could take a link to some history section you wrote about this particular thing. It'll just take you straight to it or pop it up in a little window. Same thing. You could link to a magic item. Well, that magic item could link to the SRD or could link to your personal written magic item thing, and it'll kick you straight over to it so you're not having to search for it and things like that. Or you could have a fight where the monsters are going to be in there, and you can have it click, and it will pre-populate the initiative tracker with the fight to track it, and so that then it'll roll initiative for everybody, and then you can have the players roll their own initiative too. I mean, you could roll it for them, but the theory is it'll have this whole initiative tracker so you can keep track of what's going on. It's right there. It'll track like hit points of NPCs, all that stuff. There's a lot of really cool features with these plugins that take it, I think, way beyond a just note tracker. I mean, notes and organization are great, but this makes it almost like a dashboard that you as the DM can use to track what's going on and keep your notes and keep organized. So I really like that aspect of it. I will say, I think there's a learning curve here in Obsidian that I personally am going to tackle myself. And my next campaign, I want to try getting organized in Obsidian just to see how well I like it. I wanted to give it a fair shake. I know Conzi's been using it extensively. He showed me some of his work, and it's pretty extensive, and he seems to really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think if I was starting like a new campaign world, like a new setting or something like that, and I was doing world building from scratch, I would definitely take a look at Obsidian for organizing that stuff.
Yeah.
I think the plugins sounds like you can do anything you want, and that's super appealing. That being said, it looks like there are some plugins for importing OneNote notes from OneNote to Obsidian, so maybe I'll experiment with that too. And
you ever noticed how everybody's note taking app allows you to import from everybody else's?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. Today we've covered, like I said, that rise of the digital DM, hopefully some digital ideas that might help you enhance either, whether it be your in-play or you decide you were going to run a campaign over VTT over the internet, because we all know scheduling is more difficult, and your friend with a young kid might find it easier to schedule if he can hold the baby in one arm and just have a set of headphones going. Those are hopefully some great digital ideas. If you have great ideas, please share them with us. We would love to learn about them. As DMs, we're always looking to make ourselves better. We also talked about some 2 games we played, Cities USA and Dice Forge. With that, folks, we appreciate all your time. Thanks for listening, and peace out.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you leave a review of this show wherever your favorite place is to find podcasts. Oh, and by the way, give us a like on our Facebook page. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest while you're at it. If you haven't looked recently, make sure you catch up on the blog at WiscoDice.com. Hey, Brian, what's that site?
Ah, darn, I forget. Justin, what's our website again?
WiscoDice.com.
That's right, it's WiscoDice.com. And until next time, everyone, peace out.